Hello and welcome to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Seth McCoy. We have an exciting show for you today. The guest on our first half of the show is Stacy Malone, the Executive Director of the Victim Rights Law Center. This nonprofit organization was launched in 2003 to focus exclusively on the complex and unexamined civil legal needs of sexual assault victims. The Victim Rights Law Center has become the first nonprofit law center in the nation solely dedicated to serving the legal needs of this unserved group. And on the second half of the show, we will introduce you to Sharon Riley, Executive Director of Cradles to Crayons. This organization provides free of charge packages of clothes, shoes, books, toys, baby safety equipment, and school supplies to children in the Massachusetts and the Philadelphia areas. Last year, they helped over 80,000 children by working in close partnerships with social workers, nurses, teachers, and therapists. Cradles to Crayons is a strong resource to children and families in need, the organizations who serve those families, and individuals who seek to make a tangible difference in their own communities. Stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy the show. And joining me now is Stacy Malone, Executive Director of the Victim Rights Law Center. Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. So what is the Victim Rights Law Center?
The Victim Rights Law Center is the first nonprofit law center in the country that is solely focused on the legal needs of rape and sexual assault victims, and we're actually right here in Boston in Suffolk County. So
in my intro, I read that you're you know, all the work that you do, but how do the women come to you? I mean, a lot of people might think, okay, if I'm a rape victim, I might go to my local police department first. So how do people know how to find you?
Sure. Well, we know that a lot of survivors don't actually report to law enforcement. And there's a lot of victim blaming involved in this crime. There's a lot of shame involved in this crime. And so we find that a lot of survivors just want to know, how do I stay in my home? How do I stay in my job? How do I stay in school? So we provide legal services for all of those areas.
Right, because there is a lot of stuff that happens after you're a victim of a sexual assault. And as you mentioned, there are those cases where you might not want to go to work, and that obviously snowballs into not being able to pay your rent or your mortgage or whatever it is. So how does it that you actually help people keep their jobs, keep their homes, keep their life going as normally as possible?
Great question. It's really the foundation of the work that we do. So many survivors come to us and they're male, female, transgender. We help everyone. And in Massachusetts, over 400 survivors a year come to the Victim Rights Law Center to get legal assistance. And we help them by, for example, if someone is sexually assaulted by their coworker or their employer, maybe they want time off from work or they want to have their shift changed or their location changed. We can help them negotiate that. Or if they're a college student, maybe they want time off from school, they want to change their dormitory, they want to protect their scholarship, we can help negotiate with the school and help keep their educational trajectory right on track. So really all of the basic immediate needs a survivor has really are all civil legal needs.
Right. And you mentioned that sometimes people don't always go to the police stations to report crimes. So I mean, this is sort of a broad question, but why do you think that is, and why do you think that they then find comfort in going to the Victim Rights Law Center?
It seems so kind of counterintuitive. I was raped, I should go to the police. And what we find is that in a crime like this, it is so much about the violence that occurs and so much around the shame around this issue and not wanting to talk about sexual violence that it makes them uncomfortable going to law enforcement. And we honestly know nationally, only 2% of rapists are actually incarcerated. So when you know that only 2% of individuals that perpetrate this crime end up in jail, it makes a victim a lot less likely.
Well, and you touched on it, victim blaming and victim shaming. So we live in a society that we have women who are raped or young girls who are raped, and they are blamed for, well, what were they wearing?
Exactly.
Where were they? Were they alone? And so it's really, for me, it's part of that education piece and changing that culture of both men and women, because I won't just target men and say that men are the only ones who say those things. I do think women fall into that category sometimes as well, which is unfortunate.
Absolutely, and we provide services to people of all of ages, and sadly, a lot of our clients are really young.
Right.
Almost half of our clients are under the age of 24, and we have a really young population of survivors.
Right.
And it's devastating because we know that if we can get access, if they can get legal services, a lawyer can help them stay in school, or can help them get free tutoring, or help them get access to mental health services. So things that that we don't think of as legal issues, but that really help someone stay on track, so that way they can heal from this and kind of get back to their normal life the best that they possibly can.
Right. Now, if they do go ahead and do the criminal side of things, are you there with them to kind of guide them through what's happening as well? Because that might be an issue as well, where they have gone to the police, but still they're questioning what's happening in the DA's office. Or...
Definitely. When survivors call our office, one of the first things they usually ask is, I want to protect my privacy. How do I do that? The next part is, my safety is really important to me. What are the steps I can take? And then usually third question is, should I talk to the police? Or if I talk to the police, what does that mean? So we really do criminal advocacy and helping them understand what all of the options are. And really there are so many options for survivors, but they just don't know because they don't have access to that information.
Right. How do you get the information out?
We get the information out through Facebook, through Twitter, and we actually are a national nonprofit. So we have an office in Portland, Oregon, and we train attorneys and advocates around the country, thousands of them. So we really try to do a kind of a public awareness campaign and doing shows just like this to let people know, I live in Suffolk County, I work in Suffolk County, and these services are available to everyone that lives here.
Absolutely. How did you get involved in the victim rights?
I was actually a volunteer attorney. I had a real legal job, and I started volunteering, and when I understood all of the options that a survivor could have, I didn't understand that there was more that was beyond the criminal justice system. And once I understood that, I was totally addicted.
Well, I have to say, I never even thought there would be a civil side to this piece, you know, so it's good information to have, and certainly good information for the viewers at home to have.
It's great, and we have a bunch of staff attorneys in our Massachusetts office, and then we have unbelievable pro bono attorneys that volunteer with us at some of the biggest firms and some of the smallest firms throughout the whole state. So we really have just top-notch legal assistance to provide to survivors that need help.
That's great. How many are on the staff?
We have 6 staff here in our Boston office, and they travel throughout Massachusetts to represent individual victims and all of their legal needs.
Wow, that's great. So one of the things that you guys do is separate domestic violence from sexual assault. So that seems interesting to me and maybe counterintuitive in a little bit of way, so I'm curious to know why that is. So
what we found kind of over the years is domestic violence and sexual assault are really lumped together, and we treat these victims as these are victims of some kind of violence. But the reality is domestic violence victims are victims of intimate partner violence. So it's between spouses or dating relationships, so they have very specific legal needs. Those are usually family law. They need a divorce or a separation or custody. But sexual violence is mostly non-intimate partner. So that means it's between classmates, co-workers, a friend of a friend, or a neighbor. So family law isn't always a legal need that they have, but they need a housing attorney, they need an employment attorney, they need an education attorney. So at the Victim Rights Law Center, all of our lawyers are experts in sexual assault, then they're all general practitioners in just the law, and they have a specialty. So we have education attorneys, immigration attorneys, and they all come together so every survivor gets access to just a multitude of legal expertise.
That's amazing.
It is pretty cool.
I mean, it's pretty good
I love
to
it.
think that, and that must be so comforting to these victims who can go in and feel that their needs are being met and they're being taken care of.
It's true. If we have an international college student who was raped, they might need someone to talk about their privacy, to get them a protection order, to do education law, and help them with their visa. They might need 4 attorneys to address all their legal needs, but instead they can come right to the Victim Rights Law Center.
Now, how do these services get paid for? Because as you're listing off all these things, I can imagine that for somebody who's not aware of the Victim Rights Law Center, the cost could be insurmountable. So my question is...
Yeah, it's actually free. We are federally funded, so all of our legal services are funded by the federal government, and then those services that aren't, for example, our youngest population, 12 and under, we can't use federal funding for that. We actually,
Why not?
It's interesting because there's different federal funding streams for different things, and I honestly think that they haven't understood yet the value of what an attorney can do for an 8-year-old.
Right.
So as we're kind of educating and working with the federal government to kind of catch up in that area, what we do is we have one annual event a year year. September 16th, our Shining Star Gala, and that money goes to representing all of our survivors, but particularly the 12 and under group that needs representation so much throughout our state.
Tell me about that event. So if people
it's so cool. It's so much fun. This year it will be at the Moakley Courthouse. We have over 300 individuals that come. It's so much fun. We're having a top star chef tasting this year.
Really?
So we're gonna have 2 chefs that are gonna be competing. So it's always a fun night.
Who are the chefs?
I know.
What's the food?
Well, it's a surprise right now, but it's gonna be great food, and the attendees get to vote on who they like the best, which will be really cool. So there'll be a lot of really fun components. But what I love the most is we always have spectacular speakers, and one of our clients always gets a Courage Award because it takes a lot of courage to engage in this system and kind of stabilize and rebuild your life. So I love being able to give a Courage Award to one of our clients.
Well, yeah, and that's a good message too, because obviously you can move on from sexual assault. Yes, it's traumatic, but you can't, like I said, you can get up and move on. And
yeah, I think if you have a support system in place and you can access things like legal services, mental health services, medical services, you really can rebuild your life.
Yeah.
But I think that you need to have a really good support system to be able to heal well from it.
Right, absolutely. I also, we talked a little bit about the victim blaming and shaming, and we talked off camera about this girl named Jada who was assaulted, allegedly. And it became this Twitter thing where people were blaming her and doing the Jada pose. And then she has stood up and said, I am Jada and I'm taking it back. And so I think that's really encouraging that she had the courage to get out there and put her face out there.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. I mean, it is such a devastating crime to have happen against anyone. And you take really a young child like that who has experienced it. And it's beyond devastating. Yeah. It's amazing to see a young woman stand up like that. It's also very scary, because now she's 16 and one day she's going to be applying for colleges and she's going to be applying for jobs. And I always worry about how the long-term impact is. Right. But I think different individuals want a different voice in a different way. Yeah. And part of what we do is empower them to make the choices that they want to make. Yeah. So I'm excited that that the community is kind of rallying around this young victim, because we see it with Steubenville cases, but we see it right here in Massachusetts. Right. There's a lot of Facebook and Twitter bullying that happens around these sexual assault cases of young
Which
victims.
goes back to the educational piece of teaching our young boys and girls that this is not something to be making fun of or taking lightly.
Definitely. And I think too, by having shows like this, we really educate our community that it is a devastating crime, but that we need to talk about it. Right. And that there are safe people to talk to and there are resources to go to. Right. So I've been seeing more and more young survivors come forward and looking for resources, looking for services, which I think helps them stabilize their lives a lot earlier, which is really encouraging.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the college kids. Obviously, there's a big discussion about things happening on college campuses. I went to Emerson. They're one of the on the list of not the so good colleges where people have reported sexual assault and they have not been taken seriously. I just read a case, I think it might have been 2 weeks ago. I don't know when the actual assault happened, but these boys were allowed to, their punishment was nothing significant. They were allowed to graduate, got their diplomas, and as if nothing happened.
Yes.
So,
and it's happening all over the country.
Right.
I think that, first of all, we are very intimately involved in campus cases, as well as training college administrators around the country. And the White House has tapped us as a resource because of our expertise. We're the only nonprofit lawyers in the country that are representing individual survivors on college campuses. And then when a school is not handling those correctly, and we are with a survivor that wants to make a systematic impact at that institution, we file federal complaints against the school. So we really have a soft spot for these college cases because we're seeing a lot of change, and a lot of that change is due to survivors, their strength, their courage, and their ability to make their way through a disciplinary process, which can be really challenging.
Absolutely. I'm actually surprised that Emerson, I don't mean to continue to bash them, but I was surprised that they were on that list. So I'm wondering if you could tell me some insight as to what you think college administrators are thinking when these cases are coming before them, because to me it seems like
I think they're scared, really. I think all schools have great intentions. I think they want their students to be safe. They want their population to feel really great about going to their school and be proud, have proud alum. But I think that they don't know what they don't know. Right. And I think sexual violence is a very taboo topic. And for the first time, they're really starting to understand what the law is, and they're being held accountable. So I think it's great when you look at the list of 65 schools that are currently under investigation investigation by the Office of Civil Rights. Many of those schools over the years have been schools that where we have had students, and we've seen some change, and some change that will come down the road. And I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great to hold schools accountable because we want our students to be safe.
Right, we do.
Right, and I think the schools want to as well, and don't always know what the law is. So we are seeing a lot of college administrators getting training. And we do a lot of conferences. We have one in August, one in October with the Cleary Center for Security on Campus. So administrators can learn, what is the Cleary Act? What is Title IX? My school has to be responsible for this and be responsible for the safety of our students. So I think they're doing a much better job, and I think that they really want to.
Will this trickle down to private schools on the high school level? I don't want to assume, but I would assume that in the public school sector, it's a little better reported.
It is better. Well, I wouldn't say it's better reported. However, accountability is easier because anyone that receives public funding has to follow these laws.
Right.
But I think that at the private institutions, parents want the schools to be following the same kind of, regulations and laws that the public schools are following, because we're talking about the livelihood of their children.
Right.
So I think that the trickle-down effect is definitely happening. There's actually another White House event that's happening in D.C. tomorrow, which is really exciting. The Victim Rights Law Center has been able to be at the forefront of this because the administration really understands the needs of sexual assault victims, and they're getting out there with guidance for the schools and hearing the voices of the survivors, and it's been a really remarkable time for this issue, so we're pretty excited.
So what's the event tomorrow?
So the event is for the White House Task Force dealing with sexual violence and students on college campuses. So I can't tell you too much about it because it's still a little secret. But you'll see tomorrow in the news. I know.
But you've gone down there and you've worked with folks in the administration. That must have been sort of like an aha moment, if you will, of like, oh, we finally, we're making real progress here.
It's really great. In 2010, as the new administration was getting settled, we decided to write a white paper about our college cases. And I don't know why we thought that was okay or why we thought we should do that, but we did. And I'll tell you, the administration called us right down there. They wanted to hear about the campus sexual assault cases. They wanted to hear about the obstacles and challenges. And I'm not joking, when the very next April, Vice President Biden is standing at UNH and we are sitting in the front row, and he's announcing their priority of campus sexual assault, and in their story examples, they're using our clients. And so they really, it has come a long way. So I think sexual violence is a hot issue right now, but I think we're going to see so much incredible change.
Well, and that's what we need too. We need our elected officials to be able to talk about it and not shy away from these issues. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I will because I'm here.
We're on a soapbox.
Exactly. But when you're not teaching kids about sexual health, which encompasses everything from reproductive rights to whatever else happens.
Absolutely.
You're muffling that conversation and not allowing people to have these conversations that if there's a teenage girl or a college-age girl or even a young professional who's assaulted, they might feel the shame of, I must have done something wrong, so I shouldn't say anything to anybody, I'm just going to live with this guilt.
Absolutely, and we definitely see the guilt and the shame even more prevalently in the male culture, with athletic teams, with sports camps. It's unbelievable. So we talk a lot about, it's a crime predominantly against women and girls, but I will tell you that boys, the gay population, the transgender population, this whole population is targeted because people believe that they won't come forward.
Right.
And so I'm so grateful whenever we have any survivor with any background that wants to come and get services.
I'm glad you brought that up because, of course, when I'm talking, I am focusing on the women, because I am one.
Right.
But there are a lot of young men and even older men who are assaulted, whether they're gay, straight, transgendered, whatever. It happens, and people don't talk about that aspect either.
We do, and we did a huge campaign last year about male sexual assault, and I can tell you this year, the number of men and boys that have come in to receive legal services has gone up dramatically. So it's a reminder too that when we talk about populations that are targeted for sexual violence, like individuals who might not have immigration status, when they're targeted for sexual violence, they may not come forward for services, and we want them to, and they can.
And that's definitely a vulnerable population. The people who just come to this country, they're not familiar, they're still waiting to get their papers. And if something happens to them, and it doesn't even have to be a sexual assault, it could be any kind of crime.
Absolutely.
They tend to not say anything because they don't want to jeopardize their path to citizenship.
Absolutely. And the truth is if they experience a violent crime, they could have access to a visa in this country.
Right.
And so if they are able to know that and know the truth about that, and I think that goes for all survivors, it's about getting the information out there to our community, because if you know what your resources are and you know what your rights are,
Right.
then you can really access them.
What kind of trainings do you guys offer?
We do a lot of trainings for community advocates, so a lot of rape crisis centers, to colleges and universities, law enforcement. We really train everyone because we want them to understand and improve their response to sexual violence. And since we live in this world and we're obsessed with it all the time, we feel like we have the expertise to lend to them to help them improve the work that they're doing.
Right, absolutely. And you think in 2014 you probably wouldn't need that kind of training, but some people do, and some organizations do.
And honestly, I think that we can't do it enough.
Right.
I think that we get new people, at the police department, new people working in colleges, and I think that we have to, refresh that information. And it changes. Laws change, and they need to be at the forefront of this, because they're going to have individuals who've experienced sexual violence, and they need to receive that and respond that in a very respectful way.
How can people contribute to the Victim Rights Law Center?
So our website is victimrights.org. They can come to our annual gala on September 16th. They can learn more about our website, and they can call us anytime. We love talking with our community. We love training, and really, this is the work that we do in your backyard. So we're excited to be here.
Absolutely. And you must have internships or volunteer
We do.
opportunities.
Yes, a lot. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities about our annual gala, but we love interns. We right now have 2 undergraduates and 2 law school interns, and we want to really kind of grow and breed a new generation that wants to do this, and it's pretty exciting.
Where's your office located, just in case somebody's at home and thinking, well, I'm a college-age student, I could get an internship there, but they need to know location-wise.
We're right here in Boston, 115 Broad Street. Check out our website, victimrights.org. We have great information on our internships. You can email us at VRLC@victimrights.org and get more information, and we'd love to hear from you.
If there's one thing you could tell somebody who may be sitting at home, maybe a victim of sexual assault, what is the message that you would give?
I believe you. I believe you.
Plain and simple. I believe. I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a good organization and just an important mission that you guys are working on. And
thank you.
Hopefully we'll get to a point where, these kind of things won't happen. I don't know that would ever happen, but it would be nice to.
I would love to be out of a job.
Not that we want to put you out of a job.
Thank you so much for bringing awareness to this issue. We all really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And that's going to do it for this half hour. We will be right back.